Obviously, our farm system is really important for us to develop more players, and therefore the number one reason that we look at markets is proximity to New Jersey in terms of how we're able to get players up and back. And so Albany was always a great option for us in terms of making sure that we were having the infrastructure around them and getting them to the big club. But at the same time, what we had hoped to achieve, in addition to the investment that we're making in players, is to try to get the business expense and the revenues and expenses to balance out. Instead, it was a pretty big drain. It has been for a long time. So, when there was an opportunity that came up to find a market that had the proximity and could neutralize those losses, we made the decision to make the transition.
In your statement, you said marketing, better marketing expertise. Was the marketing expertise not good here?
So there's a couple different models in the AHL and minor leagues generally, and that is the team owns and operates the team, and there's another model that then we operate only the hockey side or the athletic side of the business, and we leave it to local people to actually run the business, and that's the model we're moving to in Binghamton that we did not have here. So when we talk about local expertise, it's not that we didn't do amazing work here. The staff here, who I just met with, did a yeoman's job in terms of creating a connection with this team in the community. But what we're talking about is what we didn't have is local ownership. Right? None of us actually had ties to the capital region, and we believe it's helpful for that in terms of running a club in a market.
Less than a year ago, you were here when the whole lease was getting extended, and at that time, you seemed pretty confident that you guys would be able to kind of turn this thing around and put a couple extra resources in here and generate that fan base. Was it just what was the change, I guess, between then and now?
So let me be clear, the Albany market and the capital region is an incredible market. In fact, we are still looking at potential opportunities to bring other entities, potentially a sports entity, back to this building. We think it's an incredibly run building. We think the enhancements that they're making, which were, again, just to be clear, those were in kind of design, had nothing to do with our lease. If you look at the attendance that Siena gets, and so we believe that this is a really viable market. I think the business leadership here is really good. I think there were a couple variables, unfortunately, just to get into the ones I alluded to, at why the equation didn't work for us at this moment right now. So again, I think that there is still opportunities. We still feel the same way I felt before in terms of the market. But again, for us, in terms of where we are with this team, the transition made more sense.
I think there's a lot of optimism when you signed a 3-year lease a year ago, and then obviously you opted out of that lease. Why even bother with a 3-year lease? Why not just make it year to year if you're going to stop?
Right. So our intent again was to have stability. That's what we wanted. And so when we sat down with the county and with SMG here, one of the things that they were looking for, there were some revenue streams that they needed to get back out of the lease. So there were some concessions that we made. At the same time, we looked at what's happening in the AHL and what's happening in the NHL in terms of teams out west and markets that they're moving and changing. And so the reason we negotiated to have one option over the course of 3 seasons, so it wasn't an option every season, was that we just didn't know what it looked like in the future. And again, knowing that again, what our priorities were, which were to make sure we had a market that was close proximity to Newark, New Jersey, and also hopefully in a market where we get sustained or have losses be sustained. I think we were good. I think the other question that we're just in this market that we didn't really know is that everyone said, if you have a winner, the people will support it. Well, for a long time, the team was not that great here, but for the last 2 seasons, the team has been pretty good. And so I was hopeful at the time that I think ticket sales would rebound and do a little better and give us some optimism that this was a path that we could stay on. But in fact, it wasn't. It didn't.
According to the folks in Binghamton, you guys started talking to them in September when they got the move to Belleville. Is that even before the season began here?
So obviously they had some concern about losing their team, and so I think in their fiduciary right to their community, they reached out and wanted to know the terms of what we had here, and so, you know, I think that you can't make a snap decision like this, and so to say that it just came up in December and then we decided in January and we took it to the vote in the AHL, it's certainly something we had to contemplate and figure out and monitor in both situations, but it was nothing we committed to until very recently.
How much money did New Jersey lose here?
Let's call it multi-seven figure.
One of
Leave
those-
it at that.
What sports entities are you thinking about bringing here?
I can't be specific yet because we're still in kind of the formulation stages, but I think that, you know, I think you can look at some programming that's really built for, you know, this, a building like this and a timeline that works well for the market.
Are you free of most of the financial risk with Binghamton then?
Yes.
I would assume that's a big factor in the decision.
How would you feel about that? Yeah, you know, I want to make sure, I make it clear that, you know, the organization sustained losses for a long, long time because of the proximity thing, right? So there were lots of options for us to go farther away and make money or to make, you know, the losses neutral, but it wasn't the highest priority. So when you had the location the proximity priority, and then that being able to be knocked off in one swoop, it made more sense.
You go into a town that is 29th in attendance as opposed to Lowell being 30th, but I mean, does that make a difference because the capacity in Binghamton's a lot smaller than here?
Right, so for background, none of this is a really, you know, fancy quote, but for background, I would tell you that what this building represents is one of the best buildings in the region, right? Which means it's really super busy. You get the biggest concerts, the best family shows, and whenever those things come to the market, you have to change out, right? The ice goes away, the dirt comes in, and all that costs money. And guess what? It's money that we have to be part of the equation in terms of how you run a business. They don't have those same challenges in Binghamton, right? So the economics and the way that the equation works is a little bit different, which is why they can make it work with the same amount of ticket sales that they've had here.
Are you taking a step back maybe in terms of facilities? They've raved about the locker room and the training facilities here.
You know, I think it's something that we'll have to solve. I don't know specifically, obviously we work hand in hand with our hockey operations folks to make sure we have the facilities to develop our players. It is the priority. I believe there's some enhancements coming as well, so in Binghamton. So that's something we'll just continue to work through.
Maybe this is a question more from someone from Binghamton, but this sort of seemed like it was a perfect turn of events for you guys. How excited is this team and organization to move to Binghamton?
Right, so, you know, when people say things like, are you excited and what have you, like my first thought is with our staff, right? So you have folks here who have dedicated their lives and have dedicated a lot of hard work and effort, who are obviously disappointed. And so, you know, my first thought is to make sure that they're taken care of and we've got a place and a home and everyone feels good about the transition. The second is, you know, we've got a lot of committed, dedicated fans here, you know, boosters that have been around, sponsors that have been really committed. And so, you know, I can't tell you I'm at a point where I'm excited. I'm still really feeling more empathetic to what it's like to lose something that you really love. And I think over time, we hope that the next 3 months can be something of a long celebration of the tenure and term that the team has had here, both these last 7 years, but the first 13 as the River Rats. And then, you know, then you think about the new day maybe when the next season comes.
Is there any opportunity for the current staff to catch on down there?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about, and everyone has their own personal journey. Some folks can pick up and move and some people can't, right? So that's something we'll work with each of them on individually to figure out what's best for them. But certainly with, we own a few different teams in a few different markets, certainly want to make options and opportunities available to people.
When you're dealing with a team or a brand that has been in an area for a while, you get the fan base that have come, you get the people that you see every game in, game out, year after year. At some point, it does become more of a business decision, and you have to treat it as a business rather than just, you know, a team in a community. It is a business that you have to generate money goes in, comes out.
Yeah, there's two ways to look at that. I mean, it is definitely something that becomes ingrained and part of your identity as being part of this community. You have people who come to these games, and that it may be that point in the week where they get to see their friends, or maybe, and that's the power of sport, right? We understand that, we believe it, but at the same time, as you said, there's a cost to it. So if it were truly a community only deal, like, it would be easy. I would just send out a bill to everybody and say, listen, here's your assessment. Everyone has to chip in this much, and we'll just keep going. But that's not how it works. And so, unfortunately, you know, you have to kind of sometimes make these decisions and choices. Now, do we hope that we either can backfill with an entity that they can become accustomed to as well, a part of their routine? Great. If not, you know, again, we're not turning our backs on the fans here. We want to figure out a way that we can celebrate their loyalty to the team.
Question would come up, similar situation up in Glens Falls, they brought an ECHL team in. Is that something potentially on the horizon?
Again, I think everything is possible. Okay, I think that what you have here is really strong community leadership. You've got a really well-run building. You've got people who have passion and fortitude. So I think anything is possible. I would say if we were to do it again, you know, in terms of how I think it would work, we would really look to partner with people who actually are from here, to be part of, you know, having some flesh and blood in the game, to make sure that, again, this is a cooperative endeavor as opposed to just, you know, a hockey team owned by people from somewhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.